whether it's a guy or the girl, it's like there's not an ounce of fat. You would look and just think these are perfect beings. The magnifying glass tool and enhance certain features and how you hourglass the figure. And he's showing me this, and I'm thinking everybody is comparing themselves to that.
You're comparing yourself. Go, I'm never going to sound that good. I'm never going to be. Can I just tell you, I have friends that don't sound that good. You're only hearing the best moments, and then in those best moments, they're being tweaked and auto-tuned and corrected. Online environment that you might be comparing yourself to, smaller worship team against larger worship team and bigger budget. They've just got the tools, the resources, the Photoshop that editor had to show you those tricks of the trade to make people look different in an image. The artist have set such a level due to production to where they can't duplicate that live. And it's like, what in the world have we gotten into? We're creating these moments of just like perfection that isn't real. And we're trying to hold ourselves up to something that can't even be obtained.
More. The best thing that can happen to you in your comparison is a mental pig pen that you find yourself in and realize, I had it so much better in my ordinary life.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Armchair Authentic. It's so great to have you with us today. We've designed a podcast to try to help you fulfill your God assignments in life through having real conversations with real people about real life. Now, Justin and I have been doing life with each other for over 38 years, and it has been the joy of our life to really get the chance to steward our story in a way that serves your story. We do this through conversations, and in fact, one of the conversations we had today was around this idea of how unhealthy comparison can actually lead to being the thief of joy in your life. Now, before we dive into that conversation, I simply want to take a moment and say thank you again to every one of you who have taken the time to rate and review the podcast on all your favorite streaming platforms. It's so great to hear from you, but more than that, it is truly the best way that we can serve those who haven't found us on this journey yet. Now, if you are new to the podcast or you're joining us for the first time, we want to say welcome to the family, man. Thanks for going on this journey with us today. If you haven't already done so, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Armchair Authentic, or you can even follow us on Twitter, X, at Armchair Auth Pod. That's Armchair Auth, A-U-T-H, Pod, P-O-D. Now, our hope for this podcast is to include you in on the journey. We want to talk about the things that you're thinking about. In fact, we want to try to help answer some of the questions you might be dealing with right now. And the best way that you can join us on this journey is to email us at info@armchairauthentic.com. That's info@armchairauthentic.com. All right, guys, really excited about today's conversation. Get ready. We're talking about unhealthy comparison. One of the topics that came up out of a question we asked on last episode, we asked ourselves the question of what are we learning 25 episodes in? Now, of course, this is episode 26, but one of the thoughts we had that came up was how comparison is the thief of joy. And no matter what you do, how if you're not careful, comparison can actually kill your momentum, kill your creativity, and just really put a stop to everything that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, because comparison alone, to me, comparison isn't a bad thing. I think it can actually lead to a lot of great ideas. It can actually grow you in a lot of ways. But what ends up happening when we say the word comparison, it's really unhealthy comparison, because you're trying to live up to something that will never really be enough. Because we talked about on the last episode, what did we learn through the podcast when we talked about accountability, consistency, humility, vulnerability? But then comparison is where we stopped and said, whoa, let's make this an episode, because this is like, it feels like epidemic proportions what people are dealing with, because we are inundated with our social media life. Really, you could just take that one right there, and that's enough. Because we are constantly feeling good about where we're going with our life and what we're doing, only to see somebody else they tend to be doing it better.
Yeah, that's the thing about social media and the access to everything and everyone, especially in the algorithm world we live in. Used to, there wasn't the algorithm that would feed you things that it thinks that you want to see. I remember going to Facebook. You remember the day when you go to Facebook and you would actually see your friends that you really cared about and wanted to stay connected with. Like you would see their posts, you would see their feed because like, I'm choosing to follow them because I'm interested and they're a friend. But now it's like, I don't see people are like, did you see my post? I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. They're like, well, what? Why? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it thinks that, like what you're posting isn't interesting to me. I don't know. It's so weird. So now when we're doing searches, and we got on this topic because what are we learning from the 25 episodes in, right? And so as we're studying podcast and as we're looking at stats and we're looking at numbers and we're trying to learn from those maybe who are doing it better than us so that we can learn, that we can grow, that healthy comparison, right? We're getting inundated left and right every moment with every swipe of, like you just said, like, oh man,
they've read our interest.
Yeah.
And now they are feeding us
They're totally
every ad or every guru at how we can make this so much better. And it's the same thing that's happening with the mom out there who's wanting to type in like parenting your kids, or the dad or the corporate executive who's wanting to know how to do this. It's reading that algorithm and it is now feeding you a bunch of stuff saying it doesn't matter where you're at, you're not good enough.
Yeah, that's the lie that it tells if you bite into it. If you're in a healthy place in which we all hope to be healthy mentally and, not only physically, but like in our mind where we can see these things and see them for what they are and realize that's not reality. Instagram isn't real. Like everybody's posting their highlight stuff and the best and how you need to buy this and do this. And so for us, in this world, I mean, I'm being inundated as a parent, as a father. I'm glad you mentioned that because even if you're interested in maybe doing a remodel in your house, it's like, I'm thinking about doing this or whatever from Pinterest. And all of a sudden now it's feeding you what, and you're looking at homes that are multi-million-dollar homes. And what started off as I have $1,000. I'd like to maybe update the laundry room. Now you're seeing everything else done at an unlimited budget. And it's done pristine with videographers and you've got the incredible lighting in the pictures and you get into it. And now you're like, well, screw it, until I have 10 grand, I'm not going to spend 1,000 on what I was hoping to do. And so you're left to feed it. And it's so I just think if we're going to be authentic, if we're going to be honest, when we're talking about the podcast and we're looking through the lens, it's easy if we don't remember our why and why we're doing this. It's so easy to get off track and to end up somewhere we never intended from the first place.
Yeah.
We all hear that story about what if, the plane that took off from LA that's on its way to New York, if it's off by 1 degree, like if they enter in the coordinates off by 1 degree, like over time, what's going to happen is that plane isn't going to end up in New York. It's going to end up somewhere in South Florida or wherever. It's going to end off track. Right.
Right.
And so this idea of comparison, it really can steal your joy and it can defeat you and hold you back if you let it from actually seeing the good things that are happening, or even hold you back from taking a step towards what it is God might be asking you to do as a husband, as a father, as a parent, as a business owner, as an employee.
I feel bad I don't know if I want to say I feel bad, but I want to encourage my brothers out there who maybe they're about to get engaged or whatever it might be, because my goodness, that's the world itself. I bet every time a friend gets engaged, the guy's thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to level this up because my friend just had the Air Force.
A flyover?
They just did a flyover that spelled out, will you marry me? And it's man, that's the stuff that we're living with right now. Like, how can you beat the next one? And it makes me look back to, I'm very thankful for my simple botanical gardens, Japanese gardens, standing on the red bridge, proposing to my wife, almost dropping the wedding ring into the water below us. But she said yes. And that was a beautiful moment. We went and had a dinner together and I got her some roses, but there was no socials to go post that on and make it this epic event. Mm-hmm. But it's in my mind and we'll never forget that special moment. And what happens when you say it's the thief of joy, it's also just a thief of these moments.
Yeah.
Because unhealthy comparison, if you're trying to live up to what another person is living up to, it gets you in dangerous territory where you're missing what's happening right before you, because instead of a contentedness to embrace what is your life, you actually become discontent, and you're constantly looking into someone else's vineyard, if you will, to say, man, now that vineyard looks awesome. And you're not tending to what's been given to you. You're not taking your story. You're looking at everybody else's and trying to write a new one. And you leave what actually could be pretty extraordinary if you just lock in to what your place is.
I was having a conversation with a pastor the other day, and I was just encouraging him, and he and his wife, they're doing incredible work for the Lord. And I was encouraging him because it was something that I needed to receive as well when I was leading a church at that level. And it's so interesting how you can be in the middle of a miracle, in the middle of an incredible God story, have wonderful people around you, and God be doing so many wonderful things in the families and just the relationships that are happening. But yet you can be in the middle of that miracle and not even see the moment for what it is, because you're constantly looking for the next, or you're constantly looking for where you aren't yet. And a lot of that is driven by comparison, or a lot of that is driven by, well, like I'm a church planter and man, we're only 100 people. But the guy that planted the same year as me, I follow him on social media and he's at 250. We're doing all the same things. So it's like, I can't stop to enjoy where I'm at because I'm comparing myself to where I think I should be based off of what another church planter has done or is doing. And it's a completely different story and a completely different demographic and a completely different financial situation with a completely different, source of relationships and team when they started and when they planted. And so the culture we live in, with what we see and what we're inundated in, with the things that we love, that we like, that we're looking forward to, or that we're in a business, it's so easy to, like you said, to see what other people are doing and to miss the moment and the miracle of the just God moments and God's story that you're currently in. And when I was sharing this with him, I said, man, whatever you do, I'm telling this to you because I needed to hear it myself. I wish, if I'm looking back in hindsight, I wish I could have slowed down enough to really just, now I know I'm a leader, you're a leader, we're always looking forward, but my encouragement to you is learn how to slow down and enjoy the moments that are right in front of you, and just thank God for those moments, be grateful for those moments, and really just be in those moments so that you can appreciate what God has done and where, what's happening right now in front of you.
When you talk about church planting, there are those out there thinking, well, it doesn't exist there, surely, because I know that our audience really represents a pretty big body of, yes, it might be church planters, but it's your normal entrepreneurs, it's your different 9-to-5 workers in their organizations. It happens even in the church world because it's not just relegated or separated to one industry. This is a normal human condition. There's actually an article by Jim Taylor. He's a PhD at the University of San Francisco, and he talks about all these deals with comparison. And one of the things that he says is to actually deal with it first. Like, it's okay to accept that this is normal. He says, accept that social comparison is a normal part of being human, but that doesn't mean you should keep doing it. So you accept it first, but then you also recognize it next to realize, hey, here I go again.
Yeah.
Because we're doing it. It happens in every space that you can occupy. And it's the joke of, we talk about a movie we love, The Greatest Showman.
Oh, yeah.
That beautiful voice of a singer when she said, never enough.
Never enough.
Never. She was right.
Enough.
She knew what she was talking about. Because
yeah,
it really
what a
is
powerful
nothing.
song.
It's never enough.
It really isn't. I mean, I know I'm talking contextually through the lens of the pastor I was talking to, but you're right. As a husband, in how you're loving your wife, right? And you're wanting to take care of her, or maybe do the anniversary, maybe you are, like you mentioned earlier, in a season of being engaged and you're about to ask somebody to marry them. Now you're freaking out because you're like, oh God, I gotta outdo the next guy. Well, the same thing happens no matter what context you're in. It's just that human condition of being able to look at what I have is not enough compared to what I'm seeing from somebody else. Like, so the grass is not greener on the other side. I love this in marriage, right?
Yeah.
We always think, well, the grass is greener on the other side. And no, the grass is greener where you water it.
Yeah, so true.
The grass is greener where you maintain and you're intentional and you're consistent and you just stop looking out and start looking in and just having this heart of gratitude. And it does come with contentment.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately the human condition apart from God is that we're not content, right? Because we're constantly looking to fill the hole in the void relationally. So we get involved in all these different things. But then when you come into a relationship with God, he fills that void. You experience this peace. You have this contentment in your soul. But then at that point, you begin to, as a Christian, I can speak as a Christ follower, we're in the world, but not of the world, but we're living in the world that's constantly bombarding us with images and all the things of comparison that we can compare ourselves to. And if we're not careful and we forget who we are, then we can get our eyes on who we're not or who we were never supposed to be and forget the moment of like, oh my God, God's done so much for me. I mean, if I look back and I just take my story alone and look back at God's faithfulness and God's provision, do I have everything that I want? No, but do I have everything that I need? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've always had everything that I've needed
Always.
for every moment that I've been in my life.
Yeah.
But if I look through the lens of what I don't have, of the guy down the street that has the boat, has the bigger car or the bigger house and the multiple vehicles and the motorcycle and the vacation home and the condo or whatever, if I'm looking through that lens, well, of course, I'm like, well, it's easy to forget the blessing that God's put in front of you.
Yeah.
So the question I ask is, well, how do we keep ourselves on track? How do we keep ourselves from falling into the trap of comparison? Because the reason we even got on this topic is because when we look at what God has done in this podcast and we look at the difference it's already making and has made, and by the grace of the Lord will continue to make, how do we keep ourselves in alignment with who we set out to be as Armchair Authentic?
Yeah, I find it very interesting, everything that you're saying and how can we do this? And I think we could go on with our own list. I mean, first of all, it makes you miss the important moments in front of you. For example, the other night, I had some things that I needed to do. I would love to say that I always capture the moments and say, do you really need to do it? But I was in that moment of something that I'd seen and I wanted to kind of go adjust something over here. Maybe it was a fine comparison to make me better at something. But what it did, it was the inappropriate time and it occupied a certain moment in life I was given. And I'm sitting in the chair and thankfully it's like, those moments where you come to and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm sucked into whatever it is. And I just stopped and I talked to my second oldest, Kai, because we've been talking about, he wants to play guitar and we try to find time to do it. And just randomly, out of nowhere, I'm sitting there and I just sat down the computer and I realized I got about 15 minutes. Said, hey, why don't you go get your guitar? I didn't necessarily want to because my drive of trying to achieve this thing was locked in, but it was that sense, that generous sense you get of this is good. And so I told him and he was like, sure. I mean, he stopped what he was doing because he was ready. And here we are. And we only did it for 15 minutes. But when you look what happens after, how do you feel whenever you take a certain moment? And after that moment, I felt like that has a huge return on investment because that's my son. And not only did we learn some chords, but we had this time together. And sometimes, as the phrase goes, we need to just stop and smell the roses. That is the moment, because if you really look at this, I was talking about the list a while ago by Jim Taylor, PhD, and I'll give you a few lists that he has. I pulled this up from Psychology Today. It was just really good information. It says, acknowledge that continuing to compare will only hurt you. These are the unhealthy comparisons.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it. If you want to get better at this, acknowledge first that continuing to compare is going to hurt you. The next one that he says, get this, realize that we tend to compare our lesser qualities with others' best qualities. That's not apples to apples. I mean, think about that. When you said a while ago, when you're seeing somebody, whether it's social or whether it's on a stage, you're seeing the best of them. And what you're doing is you're comparing the least of who you are. And it's not the reality of what's really going on.
So when I see Brad Pitt, I look through the lens of, okay, Lord, you gave me a big head and a big nose, and this guy's just like, Come on, man. Seriously.
Yeah.
I know I kid, but like it's just,
No.
at the same time, that's just the reality.
It's
right?
funny because you're seeing them through the filter. It's the great point you made is before social media was a thing. Me and a band I played with a long time ago, we were releasing an album. And I had this professional photographer who really worked a deal with me. He wanted to get more into this industry that I was playing in. And I wanted his expertise, but I didn't have a big budget for it. And I couldn't afford somebody of his caliber. We worked a deal and I drove over to Atlanta and me and the band worked with him. And so he took some amazing photos. I couldn't believe it. Was like, wow, this feels awesome. But then he pulled out his laptop and he was showing me, we were just getting in conversation. I remember taking him out from some really good street tacos. And I guess it's like maybe alcohol because street tacos gets you opening up and talking. So it's like
it's
maybe
the salsa, man.
Maybe the salsa got him talking because he just started kind of going over some tricks of the trade. And he did a lot of hip hop music. And a lot of these artists who you just look and they just look ripped, whether it's a guy or the girl, it's like there's not an ounce of fat. It's just, you would look and just think these are perfect beings.
Like Photoshop, he's showing you how to kind of like touch up images.
He showed me how you get the magnifying glass tool and enhance certain features and how you hourglass the figure. And he's showing me this and I'm thinking, people have no clue.
It's the movie posters you see when you walk in. Like they don't look like that, but you think they do. Like they're chiseled and their face is kind of cut in and brought in, and they just perfect tan. And
this is probably 2003, and I still remember that. It changed my perspective, and I remember leaving thinking everybody is comparing themselves to that, and that wasn't even possible for that guy or that girl. He just spent 30 minutes enhancing them in any muscle feature you can imagine, and they looked amazing. And if he or she would have walked up to me on the street, I wouldn't have recognized him. Imagine anything that you want to, not just your body. We live in that corporate side. We live in those, as we talked about, as we have explored, how do we do this better with podcast or whatever? You now get ads of these people and they're giving you the magnified view, the enhanced view of here's what you could do if you would just go with my brand.
Well, when you bring it into perspective of like worship, for instance, the thing that popped in my mind was we're comparing ourselves against the impossible. So if you're a worship leader at a smaller church and you're doing things online, you're going to listen back to those and go, wow, this is not, even though you're giving your best and you could be as professional as possible, you don't have the equipment that churches do with $1 million budget with auto-tune and a separate producer and a separate audio engineer doing the online feed. And so you're comparing yourself, go, I'm never going to sound that good. I'm never going to be, can I just tell you, I have friends that don't sound that good. I've listened to recordings and I'm like, that's not their real voice. I mean, it is, but it's been doctored and tweaked in a way to where it's like anybody could sound good with that much work and that much production and that much mastering on top of editing, because you're only hearing the best moments. And then in those best moments, they're being tweaked and auto-tuned and corrected and all the weird stuff that would naturally happen in a song or a singing environment is being taken out of the studio recording, but also in an online environment that you might be comparing yourself to, smaller worship team against larger worship team and bigger budget. It's an unfair because they don't sound like that real life away from that. They've just got the tools, the resources, the Photoshop that editor had to show you those tricks of the trade to make people look different in an image or sharper. Same thing happens with singing. That's why when you go to concerts now, like half the time, like you're hearing, like you're not even hearing the person really sing. You're hearing all the tracked in. You're not even really hearing the artist because the artists have set such a level due to production to where they can't duplicate that live. And they don't want to let people down. And so then it creates the inferiority complex to where it's like, I'm not as good as the product that I'm putting out when I try to sing live. So now I'm just going to lip sync, or I'm going to, maybe have some moments where the moment does go live where I kind of MC a moment, but they're singing on top of track on top of track. And it's like, what in the world have we gotten into? We're creating these moments of just like perfection that isn't real. And we're trying to hold ourselves up to something that can't even be obtained.
What we'll do is we'll call that excellence. But what really happened is you're building an audience up of people who want polished performance. And that's not who you are as an artist. instead of building up your group of people who enjoy the artist and the art that comes from even the most rawness of voices, because there's an appreciation for that. And so that's happening in your workspaces, any
totally.
area that you're in. If you're creating this perfectly polished product, you're attracting the people who are only into that perfectly polished product, and you're missing maybe what your audience in life is, who will relate to your story, and you'll in turn help them navigate their story. All because this comparison mindset, even if it's a perfect side of you on your best day, you can't always be optimized for that peak performance.
When I think of what roots us and grounds us in this, the identity of who we are, we have to know who we are. We have to have a vision for our life, for ourselves, first of all. For if you're married, you have to have a vision for your family. Like I'm so tired of people asking me, like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I respect that question, but I think the better question to ask is, who do I want to become? Or who am I becoming? Because out of who I am becoming, everything else makes sense. So for me, I always have to bring myself back to, if I'm gonna, really put a stop to the comparison steals my joy from myself, I have to come back to, who am I? Who am I becoming? And what's the vision that I have for my life, for my family? What's the vision I have for my finances? What's the vision I have for my business? What's the vision I have? Our vision for the podcast,
yes.
Right? Because when you know who you are, that is the rock, that is the foundation. And no matter what tries to come against you from the outside to try to lure you to become something that you're not, or to lead you a different way, you can always filter every decision that you make. You can always come back to filter that through. If I make this decision, or if I go this road, or if I bite into this, does that line up with who I am becoming or who I want to become? And if it doesn't line up, then just throw it in the trash can.
That's so good.
And come back to who you are, because the podcast, we just simply wanted to create a moment of just authenticity, to capture our conversations, to steward our stories, to steward this relationship that God has given us in a way that, if anything, would just benefit our family and maybe some friends, and stick to that.
Yeah.
And because if we're not careful, 26 episodes in and counting, we could end up biting into the same comparison and become something we never intended to become. And to feel like we've got to do this, or we got to do that, or we've got to lean into this or lean into that, when that was really never the intent. And that's what comparison can do overall in the long term.
Yeah. And like how you said, you're really not just buying into, but it's like you're biting into this. Mm-hmm. It really is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We have been doing this since the beginning of mankind, where we have a good thought by it. We want to be more like God because he's all knowing. He didn't create us to be all knowing. He created us to live in this wonder of loving who he is and us enjoying each other and the beautiful creation he gave us to help take care of. But it was never meant to be from this toil, the ground being hard to produce. Like, he gave us this environment where, had we not originally sinned, right, we'd still be working, but it would be this creative, artistic work, because God took pleasure even in his work. And so we're living in this life, not taking on what the artist of artists has given us in our daily work. Instead, we're still trying to eat from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so another one of these that Jim Taylor, PhD, talks about, he says, when you're comparing to somebody, or when you're doing the whole comparison thing, recognize that you only see the outside of a person and have little knowledge of who they are inside. They may appear happy on the outside, but may be miserable on the inside. So there's a cost that you think, man, I've got to do all this to become that. But if you would let that story actually finish and go, maybe we've talked about this before. I know you and I have. I like to go to Wikipedia when I'm in one of those wanderlust moments, or maybe find myself on the verge of, am I envying somebody? And I'll go read their story. And this is no judgment on anybody who's walked through this. God's grace is fresh for today. But I'll read about all these successes that is what you hear about. But if you get into the story, you also see that this man or this woman, 3 divorces later,
what cost?
8 children who don't want anything to do with them. But yet all we're talking about from the world is they're on the red carpet.
Look at their successful business.
And it gets back to what is
what's success?
Success. And when you're blinded by that, you're eating that fruit and you're just going straight at more until you find that the best thing that can happen to you in your comparison is when you're, even if it's a mental pig pen that you find yourself in and realize, I had it so much better in my ordinary life. And sometimes God is wanting to get you back to realize the amazing epic moment that we've talked about in episodes before. It was this ordinary moment that you were already in. And all he asked of you and all he asked of me was to steward our story, not somebody else's.
I love that question. What is success? What is success for you? Is it more money? Is it more fame? Is it more clicks? Is it more followers? You know, for me, I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'll probably word it differently every time. But the goal for me is success of, you know, is that I'm loving God and that I'm loving my family and that my family loves me. And that is the core, because I want to become a person. I want to become a man. I want to become, you know, somebody that my family loves, and I love my family and they love me. And, you know, we're talking about this whole idea of comparison, right? The idea to fight back on that is you got to come back to the root of who you are and who you're becoming, and know that if you don't have a vision for your life, begin to write that down and keep it simple. Keep it simple, because when you come back to that, it roots you, it grounds you, and it can be a filter for every other decision, every other distraction that might come your way to keep you from really truly becoming who you want to become, but also the trap that you can walk in to get you into a place where you can't even see what's in front of you and can't be grateful for the moments that you're having. Yeah, one thing I was thinking about earlier and that you mentioned was talking about living in the moment. July 4th just happened. And I refuse to take picture of fireworks. I mean, like on your scroll, you scroll your Instagram, your Facebook, you probably saw nothing but fireworks. You know where I was? I didn't have my camera out. I didn't have my phone out. I wasn't trying to film anything. I looked to my right. My son was in a chair, and we were singing "God Bless America" or whatever song was happening. You know, when the fireworks were going on, I looked to my left. There's my wife. I look over. I see your family, of friends. I look out in front of me. I see thousands of people gathered together on this mall over in Trustful. And it's just an incredible moment. And it's a moment that will live in my mind forever. I stopped, I slowed down, I enjoyed the moment. I wasn't looking through the lens of a camera. I was living in a moment, and I wasn't caught into comparison thinking, my God, I wish I was on the other side of town watching that firework. I can't believe I'm not in New York. I can't believe I'm not in DC. I can't believe, wherever. 30-minute fireworks session. We had 15 minutes. It was great, but I was with my family. We had this incredible moment. And it's something that I'm like, you know what? This is success right here. That's right. This is a beautiful moment.
And no one will ever take that picture. That picture is forever embedded in your brain. And you're going to take that moment with you forever. And that's the beauty of this. Yeah. It's like, accept who you are. I'll read just a couple of more of these before we wrap up, because it says it perfectly. Accept your humanity. Like, that acceptance is huge. You were wired so uniquely.
Yeah.
We don't have to compare. If we want to compare in the good way and learn and get better, great. But if you're feeling negative who you are, remind yourself you were created by the creator of creators, and accept your humanity, because we're all imperfect beings who still deserve love, respect, and appreciation. Another thought is, what are some of the strengths that you can think about? Focus on those strengths. Focus on your goals and how to achieve them, and remind yourself who you want to be. Deep inside this sense of who you are. And we don't mean like just go be your best life, be you. We believe you look at everything according to the word of God that he placed and said you are. And we're trying to become that on the daily. And so lock into who you are and accept it. And the best way to do that, which I think it would be great to spend our next episode on, is to actually limit your social media intake. If you have this addiction, which I understand, I think a majority of us would probably say, wow, I'm way too into this. Imagine what would happen if you could limit the time. Maybe that's 15 minutes, maybe that's an hour. I don't know what your time is, but if you could limit it and then see, what is your thought life? What does your comparison life turn into? Do you feel more joy in who you are and what you're becoming? Or do you feel the sense of you have a great moment and then you go and watch something and you compare, and it's like the bird from the sky that comes and plucks that seed and it's gone?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation. In fact, as we were talking through this, I was already thinking through some of the things that I've done to limit my social media intake. And there's a lot of joy on the other side, right? It's called selective ignorance, right? I select to be ignorant. I don't have to know everything of what's happening around the entire world at every moment, from every aspect of the planet, from every news channel, every source. Like, there is a peace that passes all understanding that guards our heart and mind in Christ Jesus. When we make decisions, right? Those decisions filter through the lens of the vision of who we want to become. And if we want to have joy, we have got to make decisions that line up with what brings us joy in our life for who we are becoming. And I look forward to carrying on that conversation in next episode. Until then, God bless.
Thank you for listening to Armchair Authentic with Rhett and Justin. Hey, we enjoyed being with you today. If you would, take a moment and rate and review our podcast. When you do that, it helps spread the word of Armchair Authentic. We'd also love to continue this conversation with you, so reach out. Let us know what's going on at info@armchairauthentic.com. Well, until next time, we hope you have a great week. See you soon.